I've gone live. Well, we'll find out. We're going to test this. Have I actually gone live? Is this really live? Or is it just me sitting in my office by myself talking? Because I do that sometimes too, and I love it. Looks like I am actually live. So I'll put that over there. I can see the comments. I make this small so I can see my face. There we go. And then I move it up close to the camera. Does anyone else do this technique, this life hack where we take our little, you take your video and then you put it up as close as you can to this camera. Hey, Andrew, nice to see you, man. Get as close to the camera so that that's where your focus is. I have a big monitor and the camera is right at the top right here, but this, like, I can look down here and still be looking at part of my screen real estate. So if I have a zoom maximized, it's very awkward. People think I'm just distracted, just doing something other than what I'm actually doing, and that's not the way I play. So I'm fresh back from vacation. Well, I'm still on vacation and take June and December off each year. I'm fresh back from the UK, the United Kingdom, where we spent about just shy of 3 weeks in Scotland and then a little bit of time in London. I'm drinking coffee today. Screw tea. I'm on vacation. I'm not drinking tea. No way. So got to do a few cool things. I got to pick up some dope antiques. Like, look at this rad spyglass I bought at a antique shop. This is a Scout Regiment, the London Scope. No, the Scout Regiment telescope. I have no idea how old this is, but it's in beautiful condition. Look at that. I'm gonna look at stuff through it. I really like buying antiques, which is kind of funny because as a kid I thought they were the most boring thing an adult could possibly do. Then I became a boring adult. One of the we were staying briefly with one of our friends, Mia, in London, in a place called Maidenhead, and she has two kids, and they were in and out of the house. One of them was staying with us for a little bit, and then another one was staying for the rest of the time. And at one point, because Mia and Bay were like talking about all the flowers of this place we went to, he turned to me and he said, "Do you just like when you get older, do you just suddenly start to appreciate flowers?" And I was like, that is a great question and so understandable because as a kid, they're the most boring thing in the world. And I think for me too, I'm not as into flowers as Bay and them are, but like I remember this distinct moment as when I was around 19, thinking there's going to be a point where I just become responsible, right? Like that's just going to happen. There's a switch that gets flicked or something, and then suddenly I stop partying, drinking as much, and I start saving money, and like things just kind of happen, right? But that's not the way it works. It's much more gradual. It's kind of funny how it goes. So, got to visit some really good distilleries, which is one of the things I wanted to do. I've got a bottle of scotch here to show you that I brought back from Aberlour, which is a bloody good distillery. It came in this fancy little box because it's a smaller little special edition bottle. So I'll pull it out so we can take a look at it. I don't know that I'll actually drink this whiskey. I mean, I'll probably crack it to share with my friends a bit, but this is what's called a single cask edition, and it's a cask strength distillery. You can see it says bottled naturally at cask strength. And what that means, yeah, it is Alice in Wonderland, Andrew. All of our mugs here at Disney, for the most part, because Bay is the one that buys mugs, not me. I just go along with it for the ride. So a cask strength whiskey, what typically happens with whiskey is it gets matured in barrels and usually loses some of its alcohol. Some of the alcohol evaporates while it's maturing in barrels. And that brings it down from, I think it starts around 70%, 75%, something up there pretty high. And as it matures, it comes down usually to around 58, 60, somewhere thereabouts. And then what they do is they dilute it to bring it down to about 40%, somewhere thereabouts between 38 and 44. And that's typically what you buy Scotch at. Cask strength is where they bottle it straight out of the cask. So they've matured it and then they just put it in a bottle and sell it. And the reason that you might want a cask strength whiskey, which is usually around 55, 52% alcohol, is that it's much less watered down, so you can taste the nuance of the whiskey is much stronger. It's much more pronounced. Its flavor is right there in your face. But you have to then kind of moderate that for yourself by adding water so that you don't blow your taste buds away with the alcohol because it's 60, 58%, whatever that is. That's a lot. That's a lot on the mouth. And so whiskey aficionados, or at least some of them, will buy cask strength whiskey and drink it that way because you really get to taste the unadulterated flavor of the whiskey. The character is really there. But some people don't like that because you got to water it down and stuff. The interesting thing about this particular whiskey here is that it's at a whopping 66%. And the guy at the store, maybe he was at the distillery, Aberlour Distillery, he might have just been telling this to get me to buy it, in which case it worked. But he was saying, like, typically as you mature it in the cask, it comes down to around a 60%. This one's retained a percentage at 66.5%. It's unheard of. There's some mystical capacity going on with this. What's up, Jay? Yeah, ice. That's the other thing we'll do is we'll add an ice cube with the whiskey and then let it slowly open up the character of the whiskey. So anyhow, this is one of the bottles I brought back. We did a drive through a lot of the Highlands, which is a beautiful place to drive. And we drove through what's called the Glenlivet Estate, which is incredible. It's this massive amount of land that has the Glenlivet distillery on it, which is not a particularly impressive scotch in my opinion. It's got a whole bunch of other distilleries. It's just gorgeous, and you see these sweeping mountainous hills, all with green, with sheep just pasturing out there, which is really cool. So we went to a bunch of distilleries there, most of which were closed. And then the three that we stopped at, and actually I sampled some whiskeys and bought stuff, was Aberlour, another one called Glenallachie, and then a third one, which most people have heard of, called Talisker. Talisker was by far my favorite. It was way out on the Isle of Skye, which is this island off the west of Scotland. Just this modest distillery sitting on a loch, basically a lake or a bay, a body of water. And it was super chill. And we just sat there, tried some whiskeys, walked around this tiny little village. Everything in Scotland's villages. So you drive for 20 minutes to the next village, and it's just this tiny little enclave of people and stores, and then off you go to the next one. So super cool. Highly recommend it. The other thing I'll say is learning to drive on the left side of the road is a bit intimidating, and it's an interesting thing because we were in the Highlands of Scotland. So there's not a ton of traffic. It's not like particularly busy. Hello. Okay. Okay. Be gone. Thank you. We're in the Highlands of Scotland, where it's not particularly there's not a lot of traffic, but the roads are very, very narrow. And what I found most challenging was I'm used to being on what side of the car am I typically on? I guess I'm on the left side of the car because we drive on the right side of the road. So I'm adjacent to the midline where my passenger side is. Whereas driving on the left side with me sitting in the right side of the car, I kept pushing the car, naturally edging the car over right up against the wall that we were driving against, because that's how I was used to, back home, my understanding the dimensions of the car is that I've got, I don't know, I guess I'm used to just having a little bit of space on my left side. So I naturally, that's what I'm used to having. So I kept kind of treating the road as though I had way more room on my left. And for the first couple of days, I had to get Bay to keep reminding me like, hey, you're getting really close. You're getting really close to the edge of the road, and you don't get a lot of room. You get like maybe 6 inches on either side of you, if that much. It's quite intimidating. But as time went on, I started to really appreciate it. And what became more challenging was managing my dad in particular's energy about the speed I was going, or when a car would come. It started to become a joke for Bay and I, where every time a car would come towards us, Dad would go in the back seat, and I would just have to sort of let that go. And there came a few times where we had to go out and pick up dinner or something like that, and I was like, okay, Mom and Dad, you guys stay here. Bay and I will go because I want to be able to drive a little faster. My parents' preference was, my dad in particular, was that I'd go about, if the speed limit was 60 miles per hour, which is about 100 kilometers an hour, the preference would be that I drive around 40, which is, if we translate that, that'd be like if I was going 75 kilometers an hour on a highway that's 100 kilometers an hour. So that's a that's a little obnoxious for me, and much so than I wanted. So those things were kind of challenging. Uh, let's see. Anything else I want to share about that trip before we dive into these topics we've got today? Yeah, Andrew's saying you really did not like driving the other side of the road. I didn't realize that Australia was left side as well. Funny these things, isn't it? Especially given I would have thought Commonwealth, England, and then we've got Canada, Australia. I don't know which side New Zealand drives on. There's not a lot that drive left side. It's very funny and interesting. Oh well. I by the end of it, I felt pretty confident and felt pretty good about managing roundabouts too. What confused me about roundabouts, we have some roundabouts in Victoria, but they're single lane. So you just get in it, you go around until you find your exit, and then off you go. In England, roundabouts can be up to three, sometimes more lanes. And what you do is you pull up to it just like you would an intersection. You choose the appropriate lane for am I going to turn right and basically end up over there. But in order to turn right, I'm going to go all the way around the roundabout and then exit. And you indicate accordingly. And that took a while for me to get used to. And further, when you're on the leftmost lane, that means I'm going to exit at the next exit. And so what I kept doing is like, well, I'm going to get in the leftmost lane because it'll be the easiest to get off, but I'm going to go all the way to the right side, and then people would honk at me because I was meant to turn off. And so these are interesting things you learn to do as you find yourself in other places. Driving's probably the most stressful one because it's edgy, dangerous. Talking a different language is embarrassing because you're like, I feel like a dork and people they think I'm stupid and I feel dumb because I don't speak the language. But me feeling dumb because I don't speak a language is not going to lead to someone's death, which to your point, Andrew, can be edgy when you're driving in a car. Let's see, what other updates do we have? I caught COVID while I was in Scotland. And one of the things that was really interesting over there was here on Vancouver Island, the island we live on, it's very what's the right way to describe it? Like, I guess cautious or very conscientious would be another way. And, if you wanted to be uncharitable, you could say we're very conformist, I suppose. But like a lot of people still wear masks when they go inside. When you sit down in a restaurant, you're still wearing your mask until you sit down and you remove it. You know, all of that sort of stuff. And so we wore a mask to the airplane. We got into Edinburgh, and then there's not a mask to be seen. And you'd get into a pub, and the pub was packed. And it was just like, oh, it's as though there's no epidemic in the public consciousness whatsoever. And so maybe the first day I was sort of wearing a mask, and I was like, well, I don't know. I guess I could hold that on the whole time, but whatever. Let's just give it away. Let's not worry about that. And so about two-thirds of the way through, around the 10th day, I started to get sick. My mom had gotten sick. She tested negative initially, and then I tested later on and got positive. And we're like, okay, looks like we got COVID. My mom and my dad both caught it, and all of us were coughing and had this stuff. But most interesting is Bayes tested four different times, and gotten a negative result each time. In spite of being around us, all three of us have caught it. This is very funny. So that's lingering. You can probably hear it in my voice a little bit, and it's been hanging out with me for a while. I'm so grateful for the vaccine because the result for me is kind of like it's felt like the first couple of days felt a bit like the flu, had fevers and kind of that achy feeling, and then it mostly morphed into like a cough, some mucus, kind of like a lingering cold. The exception to that is my taste has been impacted, which, as we know, is part of what COVID sometimes does. And so for the last week or so, my taste feels like it's been maybe 50%, sometimes lower, sometimes about 30%. And that's been really annoying because I haven't been able to appreciate a good drink or delicious food. And I love eating food. I really like delicious food. So that's been the other part of that adventure. I brought back this old cricket ball. Nice good looking cricket ball there. And I came home and the next proof of this book is ready. So here's the first one, proof one, proof two. They look similar, don't they? This one I got a glossy cover so I can see how that looks because I don't like that matte cover. So I need to go through this massive tome. And at this point, all I'm really doing is making sure, like, visually, does this all make sense? Does all of this layout kind of Does it look the way I think it should look? Are there any pages that look really weird where, you end up with, let me find some examples. So we have practices at the end of each chapter for the qualities of being. And sometimes we've pretty much made it different, but sometimes in the previous proof, you'd have this page like you just end with one little thing here at the end of the spread, and you just have white space, and that would look kind of weird. So we've been fiddling with that, getting it to look the way it's meant to look. And then after this, I'm going to go and pick up the hardcover proof that I've also ordered that I'm waiting for. So what happens next is I have to decide on a launch date, and then I have to enlist about 100 people to buy the ebook for 99 cents on the day that I launch. And what that does is it gets you qualified. It's basically like I'm kind of asking people, hey, are you willing to support me for 99 cents? Please buy this ebook on the day in question. And what that does is effectively ensure the book gets skyrocketed to bestseller status on Amazon's thing. And it just sort of has people take notice of it. It's not really a big deal. As you can tell from the way this book is and looks, and it's a visual book, right? It's something you want to flip through. It's got an index. It's got a quick reference guide at the back. It's got an index so you can flip through and find stuff. It's not the sort of thing you really go through digitally, but all the same, we're making sure that it's available on Kindle, and that's the way you do this, apparently. So I don't know. I just do what these people tell me to do. Huh, interesting. You hit a parked car. So was it like parked and it was just too narrow a road for you, Andrew? And then as a result, you kind of skimmed it? It took a while to get used to. They're very intimidating, especially because most of the people on those roads do not slow down. They are comfortable with the narrowness of the roads, and they're like, I'm coming through. Lorries, big trucks come through that seemed not concerned one whit about my pace or what was happening. So. All right. Well, I don't think there's anything else to catch y'all up on. We should probably get into these. Where did I put my description? I got to figure out where I put my questions, my topics. I think they're at the top here. Nope. Overview. Aha, there it is. Okay, I successfully talked about Scotch Distilleries, so I did good on that. Let's talk about fighting for your own victimization as a starting point here. So, first of all, this is a thing, it's a really common thing that sort of shows up for us. And the first time I ever heard this distinguished was in a book called Illusions. And the way it was worded is, if you argue for your limitations, then sure enough, that's what you will get. So arguing for our limitations would be like, well, here's a really good example is, it's a common refrain, follow your bliss. I think that was, what's his name? Joe Campbell wrote about that. Follow your bliss, chase your bliss. And what happens is sometimes people hear that and then they retort. They find it obnoxious because it can be a little obnoxious because oftentimes we can't see our limitations. We're not aware of what's going on. We're not aware that this is what we're doing. But people hear that and they say, here's why I can't follow my bliss. And then they'll present a really compelling argument for why they must continue to do what they're continuing to do and that they can't go after their bliss. That's not possible. So it'd be something like, if you make your hobby your job, then it stops being fun and it starts being work. That'd be an example. And so that's an example of arguing for our limitations. What's happening there is that there's this story that's been created, which is sort of related to his truth. The story is, if you start doing your hobby, if you do what you do for fun as your job, then it will become your job, it'll become work, and it'll stop being fun. So then inside that framework, that sort of story, the only possibility is accept, like, do the thing I love doing and accept I'm going to stop loving it and it'll become work, or keep it as a hobby, don't ever get paid really much for it, and that way I can keep doing that for fun and then I'll not have fun doing my work. So that's an example of arguing for our limitations. right? Every time someone's in a conversation where someone talks about like, oh yeah, I love what I do, or I'm doing my hobby for work, or I'm really working at blah blah blah, and the person in their mind or verbally says like, well, that would be kind of cool, but I know that if I do that, it will become work. That's just the way it is. Basically, what they're arguing for is that truth. Every time we present that argument, excuse me, we reinforce that truth for ourselves. And what then happens is the more we reinforce that truth, the more it becomes our truth, and the more we arrange our life according to that truth. And so, where we're left with is living a life where that becomes the truth. We've argued for our limitations. The limitations in this example would be it's impossible to do what you love, to do what is fun, to pursue a hobby and get paid lucratively and not have that show up as a job, not have that feel like work, not have all of the fun stripped away from it. I can tell you that's absolutely possible to create that if you want it. My life is an example of that. What I do is fun. Like supporting people, being in a coaching conversation, talking about leadership, doing this kind of thing, having these kind of videos is all fun. This is just a playful, enjoyable thing to do. That's why I'm doing it on a Friday during my month off. It's not because I have to. There's no reason that I need to do this. So let me take a sip here. Mugs up, as my friend Adam says. So it's possible to create it such that you can do what you love and it doesn't become a slog. It doesn't become a grind. It doesn't become work. It might require some work on your part to get there. Like what I mean by that is you might have to unlock or break apart some stories that you're working with. You might have to create a new belief, a new context to step into such that that becomes possible. But it is possible. So every time we argue for our limitations, we end up further reinforcing them, and then that becomes what we get. Argue for your limitations, and sure enough, that's what you'll get. So that's kind of the general example of what we're talking about here when we sort of approach this conversation of fighting for our victimization. And fighting for our victimization is what happens when we have something happen to us and we hold it, it basically create a story about it that it was done to us. There's nothing I could have done. That was imposed upon me. That was done to me. I am a victim here. There's nothing for me to be responsible about. That was done at me, to me, onto me. I'm a victim. I'm helpless. I should be rescued, blah, 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 blah. It's easy for us these days, and in anyone that's involved in a leadership conversation, to kind of make that position wrong, which we ought not to do. We don't want to make victimization wrong because then that makes it hard for us to sort of take ownership of the times when we're feeling like a victim. And it's hard for us to have compassion for ourselves and other people when we're feeling like a victim. And feeling like a victim is a very human role. That's a natural place that we end up. So we have to practice having some compassion, some capacity to just be with that. What happens typically is we find ourselves in a position of victimization and we aren't really heard very well in that. We're not heard by ourselves. We are, people tell us we shouldn't feel the way we feel. We're told we should be responsible. We tell ourselves or other people tell us we should engage in the leadership conversation, blah, blah, blah. And what that does is it has us dig our heels in further. You've probably noticed this happens anytime you try to get someone else to change, and maybe even yourself. So anytime we apply pressure, energy at someone to try to shift them off of where they are, what happens is we dig our heels in, we entrench ourselves. This is why political debate never does anything promising. It never has any positive effect. All it does is sort of like has people sling mud back and forth, and it entrenches people further. They get more and more polarized. So when someone is in this position of victimization and then they're met with energy trying to shift them off of it, what they do is they hunker down further. They become even more committed to proving that they're the victim. So they basically fight for their victimization. And what that does is it leaves them, it further entrenches them into this place where they are the victim. And their life starts to become about proving over and over and over how they are the victim, over and over and over. And so what happens as we do this is we become more and more locked in this notion, this world, this experience of life where life is happening at us, to us. People are wronging us, and it's not our fault, and there's nothing for us to take responsibility for. And what happens as we do that more and more is we become stuck there. And the nature of victimization is it's very hard for us to get out of, because by definition, if I'm the victim, there's nothing for me to be responsible for. And if there's nothing for me to be responsible for, then it's kind of impossible for me to be the one to free me from that position that I've locked myself into. I'm the victim. It's someone else's job to free me from this position that I'm stuck in. So until someone else does something, I'm stuck here. And it's not my fault. It's their fault. So there's this weird kind of like short-term satisfaction because we get to throw blame at the person whose fault we're claiming it is. It's their fault. It's not my fault. You did me wrong. That's kind of satisfying in the short term. Because it lets us off the hook. We don't have to take responsibility, and taking responsibility is really challenging. But the tragedy is that the long term, our life over time starts to become more and more and more about proving, reinforcing, and fighting for the fact that I'm a victim. And so what happens is like you start to wrap around the axle. You get wrapped tighter and tighter and tighter until we can't escape. We can't escape because it would require the entire world of people around us to take kind of like responsibility. And I'm a victim to that. The only option I have is that by some magical moment, what happens is everyone around me suddenly has a thunderbolt hit them in the head, and they're like, "Oh my God, I've wronged Adam." And then they all come to me and they're like, "Adam, I'm so sorry. I did you wrong. This is my bad. What do I need to do? Blah, blah, blah." That's the only way things can shift. And so this is the real hard part, the real tragedy of victimhood, is that we get stuck in it. We continue to fight for being stuck in that position, and we end up living a life that is entirely powerless, like a cork on the ocean, being thrown around, bobbed, moved by the ebbs and flows of the tide. There's nothing much we can really do. So what there's to do with this is really to notice when we're caught in that. Notice when we're fighting for our victimization and practicing just acknowledging that. Carol, that's a great, hey Carol, first of all, nice to see you. Carol's asking, can we compare this dynamic to taking things too personally? Yeah, let's do that. Let me finish this thought and then let's visit that and see where that takes us. So the path out of this is to notice when we're fighting for our own victimization, to notice when we're insisting that it's not our fault. First of all, fault really has nothing to do with any of this. It's not really the conversation, but really the conversation is like, when can I notice when I'm insistent that I have nothing to be responsible for? And if I can start to notice myself doing that, the next thing I can do is recognize like, okay, I'm kind of in the victim state right now. Can I love myself here? Can I give myself permission to be here rather than trying to force myself off of it? Because if I try to, Adam, you shouldn't be a victim, it's wrong, well, all that's going to do is have me locked down. It's going to have me entrench myself in my victimhood. What starts to happen is this internal war goes on where you're like, I shouldn't be this way, but I fucking want to be this way because it's annoying and I don't want to have to take responsibility. But you should take, and then back and forth. And then you just get locked in that tug of war internally. You basically internalize both sides. So instead, we want to recognize when that victimization is showing up for us and love ourselves in it. Give ourselves permission to be there. Oh, right now, I really just need to be a victim. And if we can start to do that, then we can start to let go of the fight, because there's no longer anything we have to fight for. We can just give ourselves permission to like, oh, I'm going to recognize that what's happening is I'm victimizing myself. I'm going to let myself be there. And in a couple days, then I'm going to take the next step. And I'm going to take a look and see what can I be responsible for now that I've given myself some permission to hang out here for a while. That's the path out. That requires a lot of compassion for ourselves, which is not something we necessarily come by easily in modern society. We're not very compassionate towards ourselves, especially these sort of things. So Carol asks, can we compare this dynamic, this sort of fighting for our victimization, to taking things too personally? So let me have a go at that. And feel free, Carol, if there's sort of a different way, like a way you see that lining up, I'd like to hear your thoughts too. Um, so when we take things too personally, we're basically creating meaning around what's happening out there in the world. The Zen saying is like, imagine you're in a boat and it's foggy and you're rowing your boat along a lake in the middle of a foggy sort of Japanese fog storm. What was the fog front? I don't know, whatever the weather condition is called where there's a lot of fog, the fog world. So you're rowing your boat, and imagine a boat comes out of the fog and slams into your boat. And you're annoyed. You're like, this idiot, what kind of moron runs their boat this fast in fog? Like, the condition is clear, go slow, it's fog. Be gentle. Slow down, stupid. And we're frustrated and we're annoyed at this jackass in this boat. And then as the boat continues to exit the fog, we see, oh, there's no one in. It's a stray boat. There's no one in it at all. And once we realize that, we can kind of like, we calm down. We're like, oh, that wasn't someone doing anything. That's just random. There's just like as though a piece of seaweed hit my boat or something. There's nothing for me to be upset about. Sidebar, I would find that situation very creepy. If I was rowing in darkness or it's foggy, that's kind of eerie, and then this ghost boat comes out of the fog and smacks me, I would be like, what's happening? I would get freaked the fuck out. Anyhow, so what's happening there is because there's another human being involved in our mind, we create it as something personal. This person attacked me. This person did this. This happened to me for some fault. Someone's to blame for what has happened to me. We take it personally, like it's an affront to ourselves, instead of just like, oh, it's a random event. This person didn't know any better. They probably had their own reasons. And so whenever we take something personally like that, whenever something happens and we make it meaningful, like it was an attack on us, it sets us up in a dynamic where we're against someone. It's very similar, like Carol's pointing out, it's very similar to a position of victimhood. Because in order for you to be a victim, someone else must be a perpetrator. There must be someone that did something almost intentionally, or at least negligently, that landed on you. Whereas if we held everyone as doing their very best, we'd have a lot less of those sort of experiences where we take things personally, where we get caught up, where we create it really meaningful, make it like, oh my God, I can't believe this person did this thing to me. If we can start to let go of those personal affronts, life starts to become a lot more simple, a lot less us against the world. Carol, I don't have too much more to add, so if you want to add any of your thoughts, we can kind of riff on that. Otherwise, I think I'll start to move on to, oh yeah, let's talk about the notion of discovery versus knowing. I think this is a distinction in this book. And I first heard this distinction of discovery versus knowing in Werner Erhardt's. Oh yeah, here it is. Look, you can see right there. It says distinguishing discovery. So we're going to talk a little bit about that discovery. So when we're, how do I want to back into this? When we're aiming to create transformation, transformation exists, like the opportunity for us to transform as human beings, to create a new experience of life that previously was unavailable, that can only exist in the realm of the unknown. And so what that means is like there's this kind of way I understand or know the world to be. I know that Adam has his hair goes like this, and he wears shirts like this, and he dresses a certain way, and people have expectations of Adam, and Adam is willing to do certain things, and he's not willing to do other things, and the reasons for that is X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. There's this whole world I know about. I know the way the world operates. I know the way I operate in the world. And then second to that, there's a bunch of stuff I know I don't yet know. So like, I know that to get a job as a Spanish teacher, what I would need to do is learn how to speak Spanish. And I know that I don't yet know how to speak Spanish, but I also know what I need to do in order to speak Spanish. So all of that is still in the realm of what I know. So that's that. That's as that is. Then there's all this stuff in my life that exists completely outside of the world I know. I don't even have an awareness of it. It's stuff I don't know, I don't know. It's not stuff I don't know, like I know I don't know Spanish. It's stuff I'm not even aware of. It's completely in my blind spot. It's completely outside. It's in the world of the unknown. Hey, Rachel, it's nice to see you. And so, let me have a sip of water here. Ponder what I'm thinking about. These hydro flasks form a really, really good seal. And I put fizzy water in them. And hey, Maria, it's nice to see you. What happens is that somehow the fizz just gets locked in there and builds up pressure. So anytime I open it, it explodes. It goes, psh. So I have to put it down here as I open it. It's boring, but it's my life. Hey, Angela, it's nice to see you. Looking forward to September with you. Okay, so when we typically aim to create transformation in our life, where I'm trying to support people to look is outside of the world that they know. And in order to do that, we have to give them sort of practices designed to have them see what they haven't yet seen. They need to discover something new. So let's say we have someone who's frustrated because in relationship, they date, they get into relationship, and then they find that they end up with narcissists or people that don't really appreciate them. Like, I keep getting into relationship with men that are unavailable. It happens over and over and over again every single time. There's just no available men. Excuse me. So let's imagine that this person is wanting to create they want to break that up. They're like, I've tried everything. I've tried just being okay, not dating. That's not that fun. It's kind of lonely. I was okay being lonely, but I want something different. They've tried dating a whole bunch. They've tried blah, blah, blah. And so as I listen to this sort of person, where I might end up is kind of this idea like, oh, it seems like this person has a story that they are unlovable. They're fundamentally unlovable. And like what they're doing is they're going and seeking partners that are a reflection of that story. So what that means is like if I underneath everything believe I'm unlovable, I'm not going to go and try to date the men that like would really love me because that would be completely in contrast. It'd be in conflict with my internal story. Instead, I'm going to go end up naturally, unwittingly, almost unconsciously seeking out men that reflect that story back to me, that show up not loving me because that's what I know. That's the truth I understand. Maria's saying try dating in Netherlands when you're an American. That sounds complicated. This sounds very challenging. Are people tall? I have a feeling people are very tall in the Netherlands. And Andrew's asking me, do I have a soda stream yet? Yes, we've had a soda stream for many, many years. I like these flavored bubbly waters, but this is filled up with soda stream juice, carbonated water. So I've got this belief, or this person I'm working with has a belief they're fundamentally unlovable, and they keep ending up in relationships with people that are a reflection of that. Here's the caveat. They're unaware of that. That's how our blind spots work. That's why we end up completely contained. They're not aware that that's what they're doing. They're not even aware of this internal story. It's just kind of like an automatic, unconscious part of the world they've created. So their whole life is actually a function of the story that they're unlovable, and they can't see it. Just like fish can't see the water they swim in. So as I work with this person, what we want to do is support them to start to notice this story that they're creating. Once you can start to notice something, you can start to do something about it. Until you're aware of it, you're not able to do anything with it. You're blind to it. It's opaque to you, or transparent, whichever the one of those two things I meant to say. And so the first practice I'm going to support someone like this to create in their life is, hey, it seems like you've got a story that you're fundamentally unlovable. How about you go and you notice how you find men that are a reflection of that story? Why don't you go and notice the people that you're choosing? And the opportunity would be here for them to start to notice, wow, I'm actually choosing partners. I'm seeking out men that confirm for me that men don't love me, that I'm not worthy of love. That would be the opportunity in this practice, so they can start to see how they're creating the thing they're frustrated by, how they're the conductor, they're building this, they're the orchestrator of this. But of course, they can't see this. It's invisible to them. When people are given a practice like this, the temptation is to look in the realm of what they know. This applies in coaching, leadership, any kind we're aiming for transformation. And so where people go is they'll go, oh yeah, I already know a bunch of places where I do that. Like I know I totally do that over here at my blah 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 gym, my climbing gym. I always choose partners that are dicks, or I go after the bad boys or whatever. So this is where we can start to elaborate on the distinction between knowing versus discovery. Where we look when we are given a practice like this is back into the world we already know. So it's like, oh, great. What a great practice, coach. Thanks for providing me that. Here's the places I already know that this shows up. And when we look to the places where we already know something shows up, by definition, we're not going to discover anything new. There can be no discovery when you look into the places that you already know the answer. I can't discover Victoria, the town I live in. I already know it. It's already here. There's nothing for me to discover. Discovery, by its definition, requires happening upon something. I have to sort of like, oh shit, I just noticed something. So one of the chief distinctions that we have to sort of train clients in, train our direct reports when we're a leader in, is this willingness to start to let go of the safety of what they already know and start to venture into the unknown, to start to aim into a place where they're discovering something net new. And that requires a bit of vulnerability. It requires a willingness to kind of like, anytime you discover something you don't already know, it's like, shit, what might happen? I might feel dumb. It might hurt me. If I happen upon something, I'm putting myself at a degree of risk. And so anytime we're aiming for transformation, whether you're trying to support someone else or hopefully create transformation in your own life, our job is to move away from the world that we know, away from the safety of I already know where I do all that. There's nothing new in the places where you and your clients and your direct reports already know they do something. The opportunity is for them to discover freshly these places they don't yet know where they're doing something. And you know that this is true because if those places that they already know was enough, if that was going to help them see the water that they'd be swimming in, then this wouldn't even be an issue in the first place. This wouldn't even be getting raised. So it's imperative that we start to shift from a frame of knowing stuff into a frame of being willing to start to discover stuff. I see that there's dating advice going on in the chat here. We've got Maria is saying that people from the Netherlands are weird, which is such an interesting conversation because what does weird mean? What is it to be weird? I used to get told I was weird. Well, I still do get told I'm weird a lot. Yeah, that's an interesting one. And Maria is saying I'm French and I'm telling you American guys are weird too. Yeah, all of us are. In truth, at the heart of everything, we're all kind of weird. Weird's good. Weird means that we're not just following the mainstream. We're not doing what is expected of us. We're being our own human being, our own individual. Andrew writes, one of the concepts I've been really embracing was one that Werner Erhard and I'd say Sadhguru have been speaking to, where this moment in front of us is the only moment. To truly allow creation in the moment rather than relying on past experiences. It's not easy, but I see a lot of connection to this aspect of discovery. Yes. Yes, indeed, Andrew. There's a real this moment being the only moment there is can be very it can become very cliched and hackneyed very fast because there's Eckhart Tolle has written about the power of now. Pretty much every wizened master, enlightened teacher, enlightened masters, all of these people have kind of described this notion of like what there is to discover is the present moment. That is all there really is. And as we start to sit with that, it can become just like a bunch of words, meaningless words we say, right? Oh yeah, present moment. I just got to be present to the moment. I just need to be present to the moment. But like all of these really profound thoughts that become cliches, to understand it intellectually is very simple, but to actually live it, to experience it, is much more challenging. And that's the hard work. The hard work is, can I actually let go of my knowing about what I already do? Can I let go of my knowing about the places I already know I do that? Can I let go of the fact that, oh yeah, I totally know I do that? And instead, can I discover something new? In our discovery becomes the possibility of something brand new. That's the richness that's available. Maria, you're typing that the type of weird I just described is okay. I meant they were also cold, unromantic, and just boring. Interesting statement. Like boring is often I hear that used a lot when people early on are talking about going to networking events, usually coaches, because those are the people that I'm most present to. Sort of, I help a lot of coaches because they're trying to create thriving practices. And one of the ways you got to do that is we got to go meet people. In spite of what everyone on LinkedIn wants to convince you of, a thriving practice is not typically built through lead generation. That's just lead generation by hiring someone to like market to people by messaging them on LinkedIn, which as a side note is really interesting because the experience I always have with those people reaching out, telling me how they can get me all these leads, is that they're not connecting in any way, shape, or form, and they're just sort of like pitching me right out of the gate. And if that's the experience they're creating with me, why would I believe that they would create any different kind of experience for the people that they claim that they are helping to bring to me? And is that really the experience I want to further in the world? Is people feeling they're just pitched at? No. Okay, we've solved that. So anyhow, when I support coaches this way and we talk about like, well, what do you want to do? And they settle on like, well, maybe I'll go to a networking event to meet people. Their initial instinct is, but I hate small talk and people at those networking events are so boring. And I always challenge them that boring is their story. There's no such thing. If we're willing to dig and be really curious, there's no such thing as someone really being boring. What there is our unwillingness to get curious and fascinated by the person in front of us. Now, people can kind of try to convince us they're boring. There's a lot of reasons someone might convince you that they're boring or have learned to do that. Like sometimes being boring is safe. I met someone once who was very attractive woman, but she'd been abused as a child. And so part of what she did was she created this experience when you were with her. Wow, this person is really boring. And what that would do was it would turn people away, allowing this person's attractiveness to be safe for them. They didn't get more of that abuse that they got when they were younger. We can use boring to make ourselves less of a target. It's a way of not rocking the boat. But even if you start to get fascinated by that sort of stuff, like, I wonder what is it about this person that had them learn to create themselves as boring? That's really fascinating. If we start to get curious about that, they stop being boring. We can find boring as fascinating, and that creates some amazing opportunities for us to totally shift who we're being with someone, and it can create a real, like, it changes our experience, which is a beautiful thing. The other thing I would say is like, to hold a whole culture of people as boring, it makes me curious about, well, if I was coaching someone and they're like, to find, I want to date people from Netherlands or Canada or wherever, but the thing that seems to be getting in the way is I'm finding them boring. Well, I would invite that person to get curious about how they're creating these people as boring. Because a whole culture of people as boring that's weird, right? Like, that's just not the way. Anytime we're relating to an entire group of people a certain way, it's something worth being curious about. It's sort of like, oh, maybe there's something going on for me. Now, having said that, some aspects of cultures are different from our own, right? If I'm raised, Latin cultures are typically hot, fiery, caliente, spicy, right? They argue loud, they are passionate, et cetera, et cetera. These are the cultural stereotypes, at least. For someone like that to go to a culture that might be more subdued, like in the Netherlands, it would make sense that they would have this experience of like, wow, this is boring against the context, the societal, cultural context I'm used to. But that doesn't have to be the way it stays. There's always the opportunity for us to create a different experience for ourselves as an individual. We don't have to sit in that. Carol's just writing the art of conversation, what we're talking about here, like to be at a networking event and get really curious about someone's boringness. That is, yeah, that's an art of conversation, and it's an art of, it's the art of curiosity, and it's the art of not stopping at our labeling. When I label someone as boring, it's really safe. If I go to a networking event and I decide this person's boring, it kind of it lets me off the hook because I don't have to sort of come back and say, hold on, Adam, how are you listening to this person that's creating that experience? Who am I being that's having this person show up with me as boring? Because there's no child that's boring. You know, when a baby comes onto this planet, there's babies aren't born with a quality that we would call boring. You know, there's no babe. They might be born fascinated by the thing in front of them, in which case, oh, there's real passion there, and they're just completely absorbed in the thing in front of them. Or they might be more like amazed by the clouds, or they might be more connection or whatever like that. But they're not boring. That's something we as humans learn to become because there's a safety that it provides us, and learn to relate to other people because there's a safety that it provides us. So it's really the art of noticing the labels we apply and then not letting ourselves off the hook that way. Being like, hold on, how am I creating an experience for myself that this person's boring? And what is there for me to get really fascinated and curious about? And if you start to learn to do this, a couple really interesting things happen. First of all, you'll find socializing, meeting people, becomes really effortless and really interesting. And you stop having these concerns. Like I used to have these real concerns. Frig, I'm going to get put at a dinner party next to someone who's boring, and it's going to ruin the dinner party for me because I'm absorbed in their conversation. That sort of stuff goes away. And the second thing that happens is you become someone that um, just by virtue of you sitting and talking to someone, you almost become someone that creates people as exciting. You create people as really fascinating. And so when people be in conversation with you, they have this experience of them being really interesting. And that's a magnetic skill to have. It's really magnetic because people are left like, wow, I feel interesting being in your presence. And that becomes highly sought after, highly regarded. It's an amazing and essential quality for a coach and a leader to have. Because remember, the way we relate to someone is determinative. So if I'm working with someone as a leader, I'm developing their leadership, and I relate to them as this person's boring, then it's going to be hard for me to really, I'm going to have a hard time getting enrolled in this person leading a group project or like a presentation, because I'm going to be like, they're boring. How do we manage their boredom? As opposed to if I relate to them like, there's something about this person somewhere along the way where they learned to show up as boring, and that's probably creating some kind of safety. How can I support them to step past that safety into what's next for them? Carol's saying introverted people are often the most interesting when you take the time to talk with them. Yeah, honestly, I find all that's it sounds like that's true for you, Carol. For me, I find everyone is really fascinating. The thing about extroverted people is I think those labels are misapplied often. And usually I find people that we would typically call extroverted have learned to talk a lot as a way of overcoming their fear. And people that are typically labeled as introverted have learned to talk very little as a way of overcoming their fear. And I find, if we're committed to being fascinated by people, everyone's fascinating. Everyone's got the capacity to be like an amazing, interesting, super, like just, wow, who is this person? What's your deal? And here are some questions I like to ask people that are in service of discovering what is fascinating about people. The first one I learned from Bay. We were at we were doing some work for Husky Oil and Gas, a big oil and gas company here in Canada. They're based out of the province to our east called Alberta. Alberta is one of the more conservative provinces in Canada, and interestingly, British Columbia is one of the more liberal. But all that being said, we were meeting with the executive team, and We were having dinner with them and chatting, and one of the guys was kind of you would possibly label him as introverted or quiet or kind of withdrawn, shy, whatever. And we were chatting, and I wasn't engaging too much with him because there was other people and I didn't want to just put all my attention there. But I also had this experience. I was noticing like, it's a little bit tricky to draw this guy out. And as the night progressed, Bay came and sat down and started chatting with him. And she looked at him and she said, "Hey, tell me something that would surprise me about you." And he was like, he paused and he was like, "Okay, well, I'm in a band. I play bass in a band." And we were like, "What the fuck? Who's this guy?" We started getting fascinated. How long you done that? What's the deal? So I love that question. Tell me something that would surprise me about you is such a great question. Tell me something that people don't typically know about you. Tell me something I tell me something dangerous about you. All of these are great questions that kind of go past if I've decided someone is boring, I'm not going to ask those questions. Right? Why would I ask something that's surprising about you? You're just going to tell me something boring. But if I relate to someone as here's a fascinating person and in front of it, maybe I should do it this way. Here's a fascinating person and in front of that, they've put this layer of boredom, then I can ask questions. I can ignore the layer of boredom. I can just be like, that doesn't have to be addressed. I'm going to ask questions about the fascinating person behind it. So I can start to ask that question. Tell me something that would surprise me about you. When people, when I'm at a networking event or anywhere these days, and I ask someone, "What do you do?" And they're like, I met some guys once that worked at the company was called Canadian Linen Company. And I was like, "What's that?" And they're like, it's basically a company that collects all of the linens from all of these hospitals, restaurants, etc. And then we wash them in our giant facility and then we deliver them back. And I was like, that's a fucking boring sounding job. That's what happened inside. And then I was like, hold on, but like, what would be something surprising me for me to learn about that? Or what do people don't know about that business? What is something that people take for granted about that business? So these are all questions that I really like because they invite both myself and the person across from me to like get curious, to get fascinated, to get like surprised about this world that this person lives in. And as they start to answer your question, they're going to have the experience of sharing something surprising about what they do. And that's a fun thing. And they're also going to get the experience of someone hearing about what they do, being surprised and fascinated about it. And that's a delightful experience to have. Talking about ourselves or what we do and having someone across from us be interested, fascinated, surprised, intrigued, that's a great feeling. We love that. So these are the questions that I really like to ask these days. Cough coming on. What's something surprising about that? Tell me something I wouldn't expect about that. What do most people take for granted? What is something about that business that you wish more people knew? That's one I really like to ask. All of these are awesome questions and they really open things up. And if people, as a last ditch resort, if people are sort of like, I don't know, there's not really much to it, then you can start to ask questions like, okay, well, why do you do it? Do you enjoy that? Like, tell me about that. Yeah, Carol, I never even thought of it, but you're absolutely right. Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People 101. The thing I don't like about that book is that it becomes easy to ask those questions in order to win friends and influence people, at which point I'm not asking those questions because I'm genuinely curious. I'm asking those questions as a means to an end. I want to influence you. I want to win you over as a friend. But it doesn't really matter. It's the heart of the matter is like, yeah, can we get really fascinated about what people are doing, what they are bringing? Can we start to ask questions that open us and them up? What is a question that would open this conversation up? That's fun stuff. At least it's more fun for me. And that's why I do stuff. I don't want to sit here in a boring conversation. I don't think this person does either. Let's have an interesting conversation. Andrew, you're writing that it's been the gift about being connected to essence or qualities of being, to actually feel the presence of the qualities and gifts that other people bring. That's brought a great deal of joy and depth to life that I didn't really have access to as much in the past. Same here. In the past, I was all about, here's why this person's boring. How do I remove them from my life so I can go and talk to the next interesting person? And that was the game that I was about. Filtering. Filter this person, filter that person. And as you do that, what I notice is you get, this is part of why we talk about how it's harder. It's easier to make friends when you're younger, and it's harder to make friends as you're older, is because we become more and more jaded and closed to the possibility that people might be fascinating. We become more and more enrolled in this idea that I have to filter the boring ones out, and that there's this select group of people that are for me. Whereas a child doesn't have any of that. The child's just like, what's your deal? Tell me about you. Why is there that big thing on your face? What's that? What are you wearing that shirt for? They just ask curious questions. And while we want to temper that, we want to be responsible as an adult for the impact of the questions we ask, there's a lot to be said for finding our way back to that childlike curiosity and fascination with people. Okay, well, we went an hour. That feels pretty good for me today. We're not going to do another live show next week, but I think on the 1st of July, we'll be back. That's Canada Day, yo. So we'll probably do a special holiday edition Canada Day. If any of you have suggestions, please post them. I'm going to put a request for them there. I love it when you put in questions or talk about this or anything along those lines. It makes it way more fun to do these. So if you want to make this more fascinating for me, bring those. Or bring things that you're convinced are boring. That'd be fun too. Like, what are the most boring situations or experiences or people that you found yourself thrust into? And let's have a conversation about that. I'm gonna go and what am I gonna do now? I don't know. I think I'm gonna go downtown and hang out. Feels like a nice day out. I'd like to get out in the summer. I want to get this nice pastel plaid shirt out, take it out on the road, get it walking around, get it getting looked at. Okay, I hope you guys have an amazing weekend. Thanks for hanging out. Talk soon. Bye bye.